Hello, this is Don Mitchell speaking to you again about the 2000% Solution, the book that shows you how to accomplish at least 20 times more with the same or less time, effort, and resources. Now, wouldn't you like to do that? That would mean that you would accomplish what you normally do in everything you do in 7 days a week in less than one day. So then obviously you'd have a lot of time to do other useful things, things that would please you, please those you love, and please those who don't yet know you. So today we'll be speaking about the last of the stalls that are described in the 2000% Solution. In this case, Chapter 8, the procrastination stall. So just in case you don't happen to know what procrastination means, its definition is simple. It's simply putting off to an indefinite future, or perhaps sometime beginning tomorrow, what you should be doing immediately. Okay, and you might say to yourself, well, but isn't it better if I do things when I feel like it? Well, if you review your own experience, you are likely to discover that there are at least some things that you put off indefinitely into the future that you haven't yet done. For instance, I have students who have told me that they feel a strong calling to engage in a certain profession, and that they have felt that calling from the age of, say, perhaps 12 or 13 years of age. These same students are now in their 40s, and they have not yet taken the necessary steps to act on that calling. Now, if that is a true calling, and they should be doing this thing, then they've wasted many, many years in the process. I also recall a simple example of this when I see the implications are repeated all the time. For many things that are important to do in life, you need to learn them, you need to practice them, you need to then become quite good at applying them. And until you do that, there really is not a great deal of benefit. And I recall as a high school student, I was very concerned that I'd be able to go to the best possible college and earn a scholarship. The reason for the best possible college was I wanted to learn as much as possible. The reason for the scholarship was because, frankly, my family couldn't afford to pay very much for me to go to college. In those days, there were few loans available, so I would have to go to a very inexpensive and quite inferior local junior college otherwise. So with this a strong incentive in my mind, I actually began studying for the college entrance exam 4 years before I was going to take it for the first time. Now you might say, well, that's pretty excessive, Don. Well, maybe it was, but I couldn't afford a tutor. And no one in my family had ever gone to college before. And I really had no other idea of what to do. So I would carve out some time on every weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, to study materials about the Scholastic Aptitude Test, the so-called SAT. In those days, it was heavily oriented towards knowing lots of vocabulary words. So I would memorize every week an additional 15 to 20 vocabulary words. And of course, doing this over the course of several years, I actually added a couple of thousand vocabulary words to my knowledge base. Now, the average adult has a working vocabulary of less than that. So I had added on top of what I already had something that was more than what the average adult had. So obviously, when I got to the vocabulary words, I had a big advantage. Now, I won't go into any more detail on this example, but I had a friend who was a key competitor to go to the same colleges. And he came from a wealthy family, and he really did like to procrastinate. He liked to put the minimum effort in. So he didn't really do any studying until after he took the SAT for the first time in the beginning of senior year. Lo and behold, when the scores came back about 6 weeks later, he had the unfortunate discovery of earning a score that was less than about 15 other people, even though he was quite confident that he was smarter than all of us. Well, the colleges can tell more by the SAT than they can by any other measure because they didn't know our high school. And so as a result of the fact that he got a late start in preparing, he never did score as high as myself and some other people who would put considerably more effort into it. So even though he worked as hard as he could because he had waited, he couldn't accomplish as much, and he failed in his success in his attempt to be engaged in the college that he wanted to attend, which I happen to have the good fortune to attend instead. So that's a small example. I think another one that I can recall, very, very clearly is in music and in dancing. I had a friend who I was always encouraging to prepare for an active college career. Well, she really had no interest in going to college, but she loved dance and she was very good at dancing. So she would put every spare minute in dance. And I would say, well, how can you possibly make this work? I mean, there are millions of young women dancing, and how can you do this? But she persevered. She loved it, and she just wanted to take it as far as she could. Well, while I was off at college, she got a job at a road show of a Broadway musical, and she was in the chorus. In fact, she visited me while I was in college, and so I got to hear about her career. Later, she made it onto a television show, the Dean Martin Show, which included some dancers, and she was there dancing every week, and I could watch her dance. And I'm sure she was eventually able to transition from professional dancing into teaching dancing. I'm sure she had a very rewarding career. I mean, I've lost touch with her, so I don't know what happened. But since then, I've read many books about how much effort is required to really master a field like dancing. And she obviously had put in the 10,000 or so hours that it takes to do that. And that really made, really quite a difference. I think another example that sort of happens here is in reading. I love to read, so I have this fixation with reading that my dancing friend had with dancing. And I would estimate that I've read over 7,000 books. How many over that, I really don't know. I know I've written more than 4,000 book reviews that show up on Amazon.com. So that's one indication. I knew enough about the books I could write something about them. There's sort of like comments rather than formal book reviews. But in the course of that, when a subject comes up, whatever it might be, I've really rarely had the situation where anyone I was with had more immediate knowledge about the subject or more ideas for how to get more information, even if all we're going to do was Google. So people always say, well, what keywords should we use to Google on this? And usually my keywords will be more helpful than theirs. And so over a lifetime, I've been able to gain advantages of understanding more things faster and be able to help more people through this. In addition, as an author, I'm sure I've benefited from seeing the ways, hundreds and hundreds of different authors who are highly regarded effective authors have handled writing problems that I have run into. So that instead of doing something that would have been quite primitive and ineffective, I was able to draw on that knowledge of what they had done to be able to write about it. Plus, I have a tremendous storehouse of anecdotes. And as you probably know, I like to tell little stories. But people tell me that they learn more from my little stories than they do from anything else. And you may recall that in the New Testament, probably the most effective parts of it, the ones that most people remember best, are the ones that are called the parables, where Jesus talked about something that really never happened, but might have happened, and there was an element of truth to that, and there was a moral to the story, and you can remember that story much better than you would have remembered the moral really without the story. So all of us like to learn through stories, and I was benefited in that way. So let me talk about some of my students, people who've read the 2000% Solution. I think this is another kind of relevant one. Well, first of all, it's a great thing to read the book, and if you've done that already, good for you. However, it's even better to apply the book, and many fewer people than those who have read it have applied it. However, just reading it is quite an accomplishment. Peter Drucker, the founder of the field of management, once told me that he had discovered through his reading that less than one business book in 100, in other words, one copy in 100, was actually read cover to cover. And only 1 in 10 did anyone ever open the book. So in other words, there's a lot of good intentions to learn from business books, but in fact, most people don't ever really act beyond purchasing the book. And then, of course, there are all those people who don't purchase the book in the first place. Okay, so now you've read it. So of this one person in 100 who's read it cover to cover, how often do they actually apply it? Well, my estimate is that probably less than 1 in 10 apply something that would lead to the ultimate result of the book. And I base that on the fact that I've had dozens and dozens of students over the years through the university where I teach who have had this as a formal assignment. And many of them really struggle to do it. And in fact, many of them don't ever finish, creating a solution. They just decide to stop doing it. I try to help them then tailor the work they've done into something they can receive credit for a different course, but they never do produce a 2000% solution. So let's say perhaps let's say if 1 in 10 actually produces a solution, then how often do people produce a second solution? Well, obviously having now realized that you can take something and become 20 times more effective, you would think people would be so excited to do that again and again and again that that's all that they would do. Wrong. I would say probably 1 person in 20 who has created a solution produces a second solution. And of those who produce a second solution, very few produce a third, and so forth. So what we're seeing here is procrastination is probably the primary reason why humanity makes slow progress rather than fast progress. Let me say that again. Procrastination is the stall that means that human beings make slow progress rather than fast progress. And I'll give you an example. I had lunch yesterday with someone who was very anxious to help her church become more effective in communications, and she was talking about various problems. Well, it turned out that these are problems that churches have learned to solve using various electronic and software solutions for many, many years. I would imagine that many people created effective solutions at least 25 years ago. First thing that was interesting is that she was totally unaware that anybody had created such a solution. Second thing is she said that she really couldn't think of what she could do as a first step to get that information into her church. And then third, when I offered, I said, well, if you can think of somebody who would like to learn how to do this, I could probably arrange for somebody at our church to kind of demonstrate, explain, help, be a resource, and so forth. My guess would be I'll never hear from her again on that. And 25 years from now, that church will be very likely to still not have any of these communications tools in place. And it's a continuation of this procrastination, generation after generation, year after year, month after month, day after day, hour after hour. That means that typically things that somebody learns how to do, it takes 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, maybe over 1,000 years in many cases, before everyone in the world knows about it, and before at least half of them are using what has been learned. So keep that in mind the next time you want to procrastinate. And so my key lesson for you is the one that's in the book. Learn to hesitate to procrastinate. So I'll say goodbye for now.